Jen Seasons.
And the stopping score, and the Giants take both games of the two-game series that was supposed to be played in Seattle. Instead, it's in San Francisco, and the visiting team, so to speak, winds
Randy, I
up.
think you've got maybe a radio on or something.
Yeah, I'm watching the news. I'm turning it off.
Okay.
Okay, it's off. Is that light? That light's a little bright in my background, isn't it?
A bit, yeah. Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
I made it in. I do
You
not.
did it.
I
What's
can't,
that?
for some reason I can't hear folks.
Are you muted or are you?
You have your sound. Well, if they can't hear us,
Hear
then
anybody.
where is Susan? Oh, there she is.
Susan is showing up in the attendees and just needs to be promoted to panelist.
Okay. Are they? Okay, just so you know, I'm looking right now at attendees and I'm not seeing them.
Becca
They're
already
in now.
said her.
Susan's in now.
Okay, good. So Al, can you still not hear?
Great. Randy and Alex, can you put your pronouns in?
Where do I do that at?
Click on where it says your name, and then it'll give you a menu. One of the things on the menu will say rename.
Where does it say name? It doesn't say name on my picture.
It should show up under like kind of the bottom left of your picture.
And I see your name on there as she, her, but I don't see my name at the bottom of the picture. Let me enlarge things if I can.
Yeah, look for the three dots. Up in the right-hand corner, if you kind of like run your cursor over it, 3 dots should appear of your picture.
No. It does not appear on my computer. There's no 3 dots. I'm running the cursor all around it.
On where your image is, your face.
Yes.
Box. It should, like, if you roll your mouse over that box, you should see your name pop up on the bottom left.
It is not popping up. I'm rolling the cursor, the mouse all over the picture. It's not popping up.
I think I can rename you.
Yes, you should be. Now, what about Alex? Is Alex still muted?
Alex is muted.
Alex is muted.
Ah, there you go.
I muted myself because my dog was barking.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you could talk. I saw you talk and I wasn't sure if you could.
I can.
Now, when I talk, am I popping up full screen?
Depends on, everybody chooses the screen they want to see, but yeah, we can see you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to choose the screen, so.
I just shared my screen, and it should be the image of the banner page. Do you all see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I had been sharing some music, but I think it's like I think it's overly complicated. Also, there's already people who are attendees who are in here. So hi people.
Welcome attendees. We're glad you're here.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, let's see.
Will we be able to see the attendees? I can only see the other panelists right now.
No, they won't show up on video or audio, but they can
Okay.
put information. They can put like comments in the chat and they can put questions in the Q&A.
Got it.
Christine, have you been in contact with Mark? I haven't. I think she's muted. Right, I think we should start our broadcast to Facebook. Chris, can you? So welcome everybody who's here. We're gonna give people maybe just a few more minutes to like get signed in. And also we're gonna get our broadcasting to Facebook set up. So just hold tight. We'll be sure. Hi, everybody who's saying hi in the chat. Welcome, welcome. We are just giving people a couple more minutes to get signed in, and we'll get started probably right at 7:05. So hang on.
So I'm the co-host, so I can't start the Facebook Live. You're gonna have to hit it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It was on the bottom where the
Live on
dots are. Mhm.
Choose one. Do I share it to the event or to the group?
I think to the group.
Okay.
Or no, actually, maybe you're right. Maybe better to share to the event because some people may not necessarily be in the group right now. It's up to you. I think either one works. I think the event might be better because people who are interested should get the notification, if I'm correct.
No permission to upload video. You don't have permission to upload a video here. Okay, well, I can't do that because I don't have permission to do that, apparently. Live on Facebook. Let's see if I have permission to do it for the group.
While Becca's doing that, just a quick welcome to everybody who's joining. We'll be getting started in a couple of minutes. If anybody wants to share in the chat where you're dialing in from, I'm sure we panelists would love to hear it. And if you share that to all panelists and attendees, your fellow students will see it too, or your fellow attendees in this case. I'm used to doing class.
Okay, Christine, can you text Mark and let him know that it's being streamed on the Sex Positive Democratic Club's page, and that he should post in the event that people should go there.
Okay.
Okay. Weird. I'm seeing like two versions of my face. All right, let's go back to stop sharing.
How are you tonight, Mir?
Doing well. Doing well. It's fun to be doing this tonight because I'm also doing a test run for a new setup for our Folsom stages, of which we are running 2 this year. So
Ooh.
I know. We'll talk about that later when we get to plugs.
Awesome. Yeah. Actually, I think
I even shocked myself tonight. I was able to log in all by myself.
Oh, hey.
So proud of you, Uncle Randy.
Oh, thank you, Al. Will you be my daddy?
You know I will. Wait, will I be? Haven't I been?
The
Yeah,
uncle
sort of.
the uncle, the daddy of yeah. I should actually change. Most people do, in fact, in the local community, call me Uncle Mir, and now I want to be Uncle Mir just so I can match Uncle Randy.
That's
Yeah.
cute.
Well, it has been said that I am everybody's Uncle Randy.
It's true.
That is true.
all right. I think we're ready. I think we're ready to go. Yay! All right. Welcome everyone for being here. Thank you so much. I am really excited to be moderating this tonight. My name is Becca. I am the Vice President of Internal Communications for the San Francisco Sex Positive Democratic Club. And if you don't know what we do is we advocate for the kinky, queer, polyamorous or non-monogamous and sex worker communities in San Francisco, aiming to shape legislation and encourage our representatives to make the laws in San Francisco and ultimately more broadly better for our people. So thank you again for being here. And we have an opportunity for anybody who isn't already a member of our club to join. And if you join tonight, then you will be able to join us for our exclusive member mixer, which will happen after this panel is over. And when you come to that, then you'll be able to actually interact directly because everybody will have their like little videos up. And so I think Christine is going to share a link in the chat to where you can go to become a member. So click through that if you're not already a member, and we'll give you information, I think via email, about how to log into the member mixer, and we'll like pin that for the end of the night. I want to make a note about the chat versus the Q&A. So in the chat, if you have like thoughts, comments, whatever, like something funny comes up and you want to share it with the group, go ahead and do that. If you have a question that you want to get to the panelists, we're going to be doing a Q&A portion towards the end of the night. And if you want to have that question answered, definitely put it in the Q&A box because that will be where we're monitoring for questions. Also, if you are joining us on the Facebook Live, we have Mark monitoring that. So he will be funneling questions over here. So that's another place that you can post your questions. One thing to note is that Zoom, we are recording this and we will be getting a transcript at the end of it. And anything that you post in the chat will be recorded in that transcript, even if it's a private message directed at an individual. So if you don't want whatever you're going to say to show up in a transcript later, don't put it in the chat. All right. So with that, I am going to introduce our lovely panelists. So we have with us today Susan Wright, who is the founder of the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, which was founded in 1997. She currently serves as a spokesperson and director of incident reporting and response. Susan also serves on the advocacy and community advisory committees for AASECT, the APA's, that's the American Psychological Association's Division 44 Task Force on Consensual Non-monogamy, Kink Clinician Guidelines, and Diverse Sexualities Research Education Institute, which is a lot of words to say that she is working on better psychological understanding of what it means to be non-monogamous and kinky. So next up, oh, actually, before I go on, Susan, you just want to say hi and wave?
Hi. Nice to have everybody here.
Awesome. And next up, we've got Alex Austin. Alex is the founder of the Austin Law Group, and they are an attorney who's been protecting queers, creatives, perverts, and outliers for over 2 decades. Alex's firm focuses on social justice, the arts, adult entertainment, and BDSM. And Alex co-founded the San Francisco Transgender Film Festival in 1997. And actually, they're an Academy Award nominated executive producer. And then more than one client has lovingly called Alex their compassionate pitbull. Alex has been part of the leather community for more than 30 years and is also the founder of the House and House Dominant at the San Francisco Leather Service Salon. So thank you, Alex, for being here. I want to also wave and say hi.
Hello, I'm here in my law library.
Ooh. Wait, is that just like
It's a photograph. It's my new home office.
Mira's got you beat. They've got actual books behind them.
Real library over there.
So also tonight we have Randy Kirton, also known as Uncle Randy, who's been intimately involved in the San Francisco kink scene since 2005. And has supported all the kink venues in San Francisco and the East Bay. Randy is a retired police captain with 30 years of law enforcement experience and service to the community. Although now retired, he is well-versed in the law as it relates to BDSM and alternative lifestyles. And Randy, say hi.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this evening.
And finally, we have Mir. Mir Green is the owner of Wicked Grounds, San Francisco's kink cafe and boutique, as well as the Wicked Grounds Annex, a dedicated space for kink and sex-positive education in San Francisco and beyond. Their mission is to provide coffee, kink, and community building for the San Francisco and national kink scenes. Mir also co-founded the Bay Area Kinky Business Alliance, which was running from 2014 to 2019. Mir, say hi.
Hello.
Yay.
Good to see everybody.
Awesome. Looks like we have somebody who raised a hand. I'm not sure what that means. But if you need something, send a message to Christine. I think she's got the Sex Positive Democratic Club in her little name there. So if you have a question, something urgently is coming up, then send her a private message.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's get into it. So question number 1, this is the big one. Is BDSM legal? In other words, what is consent is not a defense to assault? And I want to direct this first to Susan.
Yeah, it's a great question. It comes up all the time in the BDSM communities. We say it a lot, consent is not a defense to assault. And so what does that really mean? Because you'll see people saying BDSM is not legal. Oh, BDSM is legal. Well, really, let's look to California law, since just as an example, you need to look at the assault law, you need to look at the battery law, right? And in the definitions of the assault and battery law, the definitions are PC section 240 and PC section 242. You can actually read those and see that they use words like violence and force and willful, but they don't include consent at all. So what you have to look to is case law, which is where, somebody's been tried and then it goes to the appellate courts. And case law in California is terrible. It's People v. Samuels, and that was back in 1967. And this is a case that the ruling gets cited over and over and over again. The most recent was in 2006. And this is kind of the foundational ruling that says consent is no defense. And in this, Samuels was charged because he was, beating someone, and there was actually a film of it, right? So the court looked at this and they were like, there is no consent to defense. This comes from Old English law, which basically said that you couldn't consent to being assaulted because you were actually somebody's property. And so it's the person who owns you, if you were assaulted, they were the ones that suffered the harm. So this archaic law just kind of kept coming down and into our law and into case law, which is horrible because this film scene was apparently consensual. But the court said there is no consent to defense. And they also said anybody who would consent to a beating like this must have a mental aberration. Right? Through the American Psychological Association, which changed their diagnostic and statistical manual that says we're not mentally ill, the people who do kink. And so now we really kind of need to take this into the legal realm. This needs to be changed because what we have right now is BDSM is tried under criminal assault, right? Which is like a mugging or a barroom brawl, and these are the wrong prosecutors. There's no victim anonymity. It's interpersonal violence is what you're talking about, but it's being dealt with under a completely different set of laws that really don't pertain. So, and you might say that this doesn't make a difference because it's not really being enforced. I mean, look at Folsom Street events, right? But it does have an impact. Local prosecutors could pick a case if they felt that there was like a political or moral expediency to do it. Or if somebody's defending, it's a he said, she said, they might, they can't use evidence of consent in those cases, as well as like child custody and things like that. And this is what NCSF helps people with our incident reporting and response, because the trickle down from these laws saying consent is no defense and consent is at the heart of BDSM, this kind of spawns a lot of the discrimination that we continue to face right now.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Susan, doesn't NCSF also work with police departments and prosecutors to show them the difference between what would be domestic violence and consensual BDSM?
Absolutely. We work with police departments. We talk to prosecutors, investigators. We do diversity trainings for beat cops because often they're on the front lines. We also do a lot of work in training victim advocates, whether they're county victim advocates or grassroots victim advocates. We actually work with interns to do this. They're out there giving webinars, and it's really helped. That's why you don't see a lot of consensual BDSM being prosecuted, but it's kind of swung the other direction. And now people who are in a non-consensual situation and try to report it, sometimes they get told things like, well, what did you expect? Oh, you got hurt while you were doing BDSM, so we need to bring that back so that there's a clear difference in the law between consensual BDSM and assault.
And if I may, I'd like to add a couple of things.
Please do.
What Susan has cited is absolutely correct. And if you approach a dozen people in the BDSM community, probably regardless of what state you're in, and you ask this very same question, you're going to get just a wide array of answers because it's really not known what the law is all about. She is also correct in our case laws, as regards to this, are truly archaic. And probably the main reason for that is because they just don't come up really frequently. And when people get convicted of these, they usually plea them down, and then therefore there's no appeal because they've pled guilty to them. Additionally, the sections that she cited are probably the most difficult, meaning PC section 240 and 242 are probably the most difficult to prosecute because those are misdemeanors. And in California, a police officer cannot arrest somebody, with very few exceptions, for a misdemeanor that's not actually committed in his presence. It takes a citizen's arrest to accomplish that. So the person who is being technically assaulted would have to tell the officer, I want that person arrested. But that being said, there's a number of other laws that are felony assaults. And a lot of the toys that we use on a regular basis, if you hit somebody with them, that is likely to cause great bodily injury, and therefore it's a felony. And then you add to that the sexual component. You touch genitals or breasts or penises or, whatever it is, and somebody says it wasn't consensual, then you have a sexual assault. So she is absolutely correct. And then there's legal responsibility, and then there's the reality of the real world. And if a victim is, or if a person is arrested for a felony assault in BDSM, well, it's going to eventually get to trial. And in a trial, then you need to have a victim, and you need to have somebody willing to testify that this happened. And the reality here in California is district attorneys, they run on their conviction rate. So they don't want to prosecute a case that they can't win just to make a statement. That would be a real rarity. So if say Susan, for example, was playing with me, a cop comes in, he sees me with a felony assault, and he arrests me, and Susan goes to the DA and says, I'm not a victim, it was consensual, and I'm not going to testify against Uncle Randy. Well, the likelihood is 99.99% that they're just not going to prosecute me. But lawyers get involved, expenses happen. You can ask Daddy Al, lawyers are expensive. But, it's, as long as it's consensual, and that's the key, is consent. And as long as it's consensual, we really don't have a great deal to worry about.
Got it. So it's more or less safe, despite the fact that this isn't technically legal and it is considered assault. It's not even this, unless there is genital or breast touching, like you were talking about. There isn't actually it's not actually considered a sexual crime, but the likelihood that you might be prosecuted is dependent on whether or not the person that you were playing with says that it's consensual or not. That's accurate. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Great. And I just wanted to call out, I think, Susan, you mentioned something about victim advocates, and I think we were going to put some information in the chat. So if that hasn't happened already.
We have the case law and the law review articles. If you want to, I'll drop the incident reporting and response in there, because NCSF really believes that if somebody needs to report a crime, it helps to actually have somebody who understands the system. Thank you very much, Christine. And so nobody should be alone. And we're just really trying to spread the word that you don't have to go it alone. There's amazing people that are out there ready to help. And so NCSF can connect you with your local agency to do that.
That's really great. And I do want to acknowledge that just because we're in this environment and we're playing, BDSM is generally done with a great set of rules or a great set of guidelines around consent, it doesn't mean that people don't have their consent violated on occasion. And so we really appreciate that the NCSF is giving people access to those kinds of resources. So one thing that we kind of touched on is that you might have an interaction with an officer of the law while you're in a scene. And I think the kind of stereotypical way that we think about this happening is you're doing a scene in your home, but it's very loud, and somebody next door, like your neighbor, calls the cops because they're concerned that somebody is being hurt. And so what do you do if that happens? Uncle Randy, I'd pass this one to you first.
You're talking the cops get called to your house, they knock on the door?
Yes.
What you do is, honestly, the best way to proceed when you're dealing with the police is to just be cooperative and to be nice and to calmly explain to them what is going on. you're going to have to bring your partner to the door because they've received a report of possible violence in the house. And because of that, they have an absolute right under exigent circumstances to enter your home to make sure that everybody is okay and there's nobody bleeding or dying or what have you. I can't think of an instance that, if two lovers show up and they've had rough sex and they're playing with BDSM and they both show up happy and healthy, you're just not going to run into any problems. But you are going to have to allow them into your house. And if you refuse to allow them to come in, they are allowed to use reasonable force to come in. And even if that means kicking down your door to make sure that your wife, your husband, your partner, whatever the case may be, is okay. And that's why I say, put a robe on, show up at the door, explain to the officer what you're doing, and that it is totally consensual and you should just be absolutely fine.
Got it. And so what about the case when people get severely injured in a scene? Like, this is not necessarily likely outcome, but we put ourselves at a certain amount of risk. And so what's like, if you injure someone, or if you are a person who is injured potentially severely, like what should you do? And I think this one goes to Alex.
Yeah, that's when people usually call me, because I don't practice criminal law. I have a number of criminal defense attorneys who I work very closely with, but I usually get involved after the fact of someone getting injured accidentally. And 9 times out of 10, we are able to mediate the situation and get folks on a page where the person who got injured realizes that it wasn't intentional, it was an accident. But people do, after the fact, if someone is injured, can get much more upset as the days go on, because they're having to get medical attention. They're having to talk to people in their lives about this injury. They may or may not be able to or want to tell some people the truth of how they got the injury, and they might not be able to tell their doctor comfortably how they were injured, which then leads them down a road of perhaps getting not the best medical care. So the issues around that are really about how folks take responsibility for what happened, even if it was an accident. And there have been very, very few cases that have come through my door that we haven't been able to settle. Some more amicable than others. But in the long run, I think most people in this community do take their roles seriously, and they are despondent if they've actually harmed someone, because you can hurt people all day long without harming them. Yeah. So there is a big difference. And then sometimes there are issues that come up that have to do with people calling people out on social media if someone feels they've been harmed or if they were physically harmed. And then that gets to be a sticky situation, because is it defamation? Is it just stating facts? So it gets nuanced, and sometimes we have to really untangle the facts and the feelings, because there are a lot of feelings when these things come down. So that's my take on the aftermath of an injury that was not intentional.
I do want to say something, just add to make sure that people understand that these are very rare circumstances. When
Very.
DSF did our, thank you, yeah, Alex.
Thank you for bringing that up, Susan.
when NCSF did our survey, our consent violation survey in 2015, we had 4,500 respondents on this survey. And out of that, only 96 people said that they had actually been injured.
Yeah.
So that tells you, I think it was, 2% less, something like that. It was really, I think maybe it was 2% of the people who reported a consent violation even. So it's not like we're injuring each other a lot out there.
Right.
But when we do, the laws we have more barriers.
Yeah. And let me just say that the cases that I were referring to were not consent violations. They were accidents.
Mhm.
They weren't even someone being particularly negligent or negligent at all in some cases. In some cases, people are saying more, and then more ends up being too much.
Mhm.
And that is one of those situations. And I want to say, in over 25 years of practicing law in this area, I can count on one hand how many times someone has come to my office saying, I got injured, or someone is accusing me of injuring them. So that is a minuscule percentage. So thank you for bringing that up, Susan.
Mhm. Yeah, and I really appreciate that, like, acknowledging that it is a rare instance when people are actually like injured or severely injured in the course of BDSM play. And one thing that Christine said was, as we were preparing for this, is that she, like, one of her questions for people that are new, if she's going to play with them, is to ask if they have insurance, if they have health insurance. And what I think that points to, besides being a little bit amusing, what I think it points to is that it's important to really be cautious about, like, playing with a new partner, especially when you're going to engage in something that has the potential to cause bodily harm, and not only to be aware of that as the person who is wielding an implement, but also as the person who might be receiving that, to be really well informed about your own body, what your potential, like, risks are, and how you will seek medical treatment if you need to, in order to prevent having to go to lawyers or to have an awkward conversation with a doctor. And speaking of having awkward conversations with your doctors, I think this points to, like, kind of the discrimination that people who are kinky or practice BDSM face. And so, like, kind of it more generally, like, how at risk are we as people who are kinky, like, in terms of facing discrimination in life, in the workplace, in like a family setting, elsewhere? Actually, I'm going to pass this back to Alex first, as the legal lawyer person.
I like being referred to as the legal lawyer person. Thank you.
Yeah.
Discrimination definitely happens. It is perfectly legal to discriminate against folks who practice BDSM, who consider themselves kinky or leather. It's always a risk to come out at work. Really depends on what you do and the fondness you have for your coworkers and how much you trust your employers to understand that you pose no risk to anyone. Some employers might think that if someone found out that you, as their employee, would shed a bad light on their organization. So there are no real protections for that under the law. So my advice is be cautious. And my two favorite words are paper trail. So whatever you do, if you think that you're wanting to open up to someone, do it, but, you know, be careful. Keep a paper trail of what has happened in case someone turns around and says, you are creating a hostile work environment, you're sexually harassing me by telling me what you did at Folsom Street Fair. There are a number of things that could come up along those lines. And I think as Susan and I were chatting a little bit about the other day, it would be nice to have some protections. And that is something that NCSF and, you know, my office, when it can, and a bunch of other First Amendment and attorneys who work in these areas are constantly looking at trying to change some of these laws, and whether we do it through the DSM, because now it's no longer considered mental illness in the same way that it was in the past, and Susan could probably speak more to that, but there's no protections as of right now. So use your own good judgment.
May I add something regarding the doctor visits?
Yeah.
Please.
Doctors, just as school teachers, daycare workers, and a number of other professions are considered what's called mandatory reporters. And so if you show up at your doctor's office and you're covered in bruises and, you know, whiplash marks and, you know, a wide array of the marks that we tend to leave on people, you got to be really honest with your doctor about how you received them, because if they suspect abuse, they are required by law to report their suspicions to the police.
Yes, very.
And then you're back in that law enforcement, you know, dealings again.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Very true.
And I really appreciate you saying that, like, your NCSF and Alex, your law group, and other folks are like trying to move the law in a direction that like makes it, you know, less likely that we can be discriminated against legally. And that's also something that the Sex Positive Democratic Club is trying to do. So that's, that's one of our, I would say, policy platforms, is to get people who practice this lifestyle and the other lifestyles of the other types of people that we advocate for, to have these protections so that you can be out and you can feel comfortable talking to the people that you need to talk to about what you do and like what brings you joy in your life. But before we move on from this topic, I want to ask Susan to speak on this topic as well. And maybe like, I think one of the other aspects of this question is like in the area of family law and discrimination. So, Susan.
Well, I agree that this has a chilling effect. Like in our surveys, 80% of the people that respond to the survey say they're not out. And it's just because of this, because of the discrimination that comes with it. And so if we can stop that from happening, that would have a giant effect on our people, because shame is a killer, you know, and we've got a whole community full of people who are very proud of who we are. And yet we fundamentally have to be afraid of the legal system. So NCSF last year, look at our reports. We had 183 reports last year. Of those reports, 8 people reported that they'd been fired. 5 for kink, 1 for a FetLife photo. You have to remember, FetLife feels like this walled garden and it's private and it's safe. So many of our reports have to do with FetLife photos that somebody who was a friend or was a partner and is now an ex take. You have to be very careful. If you're not out, you don't want to show your face in your FetLife photos. Or if you show your face, you want to do it outside of like, okay, here's my face photo and then here's my scene photo. So it's separate. And even that can be problematic with child custody, because they'll send people straight to your FetLife page. We also had one transgender polyamorous person whose HOA told them that their 2 partners couldn't live with them last year. Completely upended everything in their lives. So we get these, even these housing issues with polyamorous people. And then with child custody cases, we got 16 requests last year for help with child custody. This is down from in 2008 when we started our APA project to, you know, depathologize BDSM. We had 124 requests for help from kinky parents that year. It was devastating, absolutely devastating. So last year it was 8 people, 8 kinky parents, and a lot of those were actually intersectional issues. And then because we have a reputation, we also help, you know, up to sex worker parents, we help to queer parent, you know, people, especially, you know, if you're like transgender and polyamorous, the intersectional issues are really difficult to deal with in family court. Real kind of moral issues and prejudices can really come out in family court. So anybody, you want to avoid that. You want to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, very true. And I'll just bring up one other thing about alternative family groupings. One of the things that we do at my firm is that when there's a polyamorous family or a family whose parents may not be accepting of who they are, trans folks, we try to protect them so that they don't end up in situations where we had a polyamorous family where one of the members of the 3 people who were considered themselves married to each other passed away. And as soon as that happened, the person who passed away, who's trans, their family comes in and attempts to take them from their 2 partners, bury them as the biological birth with their former name. So things get very, very painful if folks don't take some precautions prior. And as silly as it seems, sometimes just having your medical directives taken care of, having your will and your trust together when you are in a family structure that the law doesn't really recognize. So just to add on a little bit to what Susan was saying, there are ways that we can protect ourselves. And I love when people come to me and they want to do that before something goes left in their lives.
Yeah, I really hear you on like getting your medical directives in place and like having the, you know, having the documentation and the proof that the people who are your partners and the parents of your children, so that kind of this kind of, you know, invasion of unwanted family members can really kind of devastate your life and the life of your children.
Yeah. And not to scare the hell out of people, but right now with COVID, it's even more important to, especially to get those medical, and you can find them for free online. I'm not, you know, fishing for business. You can find medical directives. In fact, your doctor, your hospital, Kaiser, anyone can give you one. And it's just important because now with COVID, if someone goes into the hospital, you basically can be off. Some places are like one person. You have to choose one person. And if you don't choose that person, it's going to be your next of kin.
Got it. Okay, so I actually looks like Mir, you wanted to ask a question of Susan. Go ahead, please do that.
Actually, we just managed to sidebar it in the chat, so the answer's already been shared with everyone. You know, really my question was, and I'm glad to see this answer, when we see such a huge statistically significant decline, what's driving that? And in this case, the decline in the number of cases coming to family court has to do with the change in the DSM. And I think we see that over and over, that the more we can go through this work to clarify ambiguities, in the law, in medical practice, et cetera, the more we can educate, the more we will continue to see a decline in cases that should not be in the legal system entering the legal system. So sidebar, but I'm underscoring it because I think it's important. And for those of you who are following along in the chat, there's a great answer there from Susan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will also post in because it was such a stark example of institutionalized discrimination that we published several papers in the Archives of Sexual Behavior and the Journal of Sexual Medicine. So these are peer-reviewed papers. They took a look at the data that we had, and they agreed that the only reason for this change was the change made by the APA. And I have to credit the APA because when they realized this was happening, they were horrified. And they were like, no, this is not the people that we intended. They didn't realize that lawyers were going and using the DSM this way. So it took a while to find the right person who was receptive to our message. But once we did, then we had an end to the paraphilia subwork group, and we're able to really work with them on this. So we want to take that and do it with the legal side.
Yes. All right. We're making it happen. Like conversations like this, I think move that forward. And I think the Sex Positive Democratic Club would love to help do that work. I just want to mention once again that we are taking questions. There will be a Q&A portion after our moderated discussion. So whatever questions are coming up for you, please post them in the Q&A so that we can get to those questions in really kind of just a few minutes. So, but before we do that, I have another question for the panel, which is what are the difficulties of operating a kinky business? It seems like it's probably pretty fraught considering the things that we've just been talking about. So Mir, as a kinky business owner, what have you run into?
Again, I can't overstate how important it is that we get some clarity that in the business world, I'm kind of faced with the opposite problem of individuals, right? We're constantly am I in, am I out? As a business owner, my best friend, and anyone who's interested in being a toy maker, being a kink author, an educator, running a venue, running a club, be as transparent as possible with your professional team. You need a kink-aware tax professional. I'm blessed to work with Safeword Tax Service, give them a little plug. You need to work with kink-aware attorneys. You want to be as upfront as possible with your landlords, your fire inspector, the health department, all of the different teams that you might be interacting with in the course of your work. And when it comes to selling kinky gear, for example, you really want to be upfront with your platforms and ask them nosy questions before you waste a lot of your time. You may find that certain sales channels online will or will not allow your category of sales, and that often comes down to the fact that credit card companies are exceptionally skittish about being accepted for sexually oriented business. You may find yourself, if you have a live venue like I do, my insurance adjuster had some very interesting questions about the kinds of education we were and were not doing in the annex. And I needed to be able to answer those. In the end, he was much more worried about Krav Maga than he was whipping workshops. But you need to be prepared to be upfront so that your team can help you. I will say that over and over, the single biggest issue I have had comes down to funding. I have a great relationship with my primary bank. When it came time to renegotiate our credit card processing, they actually turned me down. I still use them for everything else in my business, but one of the largest banks that is out there, you know, promoting pride and otherwise a fan of the queer community will not work for me as a credit card provider. We've done fundraising. Many years ago, we were doing upgrades to the shop. I explained our concept to Kickstarter. They said, well, we can do a cafe, but not a kink cafe. Explained the same concept to Indiegogo, and they were absolutely behind us. The sooner I, as a business owner, have those discussions with my providers, the less of my time I waste. And I've gotten to the point where I tell my providers really quickly, right off the bat, this is the nature of my business. I don't want to get messed up in underwriting. Let's talk through that right now. And please give me more clarity so that I can have fewer of those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, like doing that work and making it more straightforward for people to operate businesses like yours is, I mean, like, this is the world we want to see. This is the world we want to live in. One of the things that you mentioned when we were preparing for this is that you've had also like difficulties getting landlords on board. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I've been generally lucky, and I will open this up because I know other folks have consulted with other venues. I've been very lucky. Wicked Grounds has had a lease for 11 years. We opened our doors 11 years ago today.
Ooh, happy anniversary! Thank
you. And in a real way, we broke our landlords in. I'm working with the same landlord for our new annex space, which is a 65-person educational venue, as I am for the cafe. They also served briefly as a landlord for Folsom Street events. So by doing that education and having that partnership, we've kind of educated them so that they can better support us and other people in the community. I'll also say that in San Francisco, we're lucky enough to have a leather cultural district that serves very much like the Latinx cultural district or the Chinatown cultural district, but specific to the BDSM community. San Francisco also has one for the transgender community in the Tenderloin and the umbrella gay community in the Castro. So in San Francisco, we've been able to advocate for more progressive zoning and coding that will allow businesses like mine to have greater protections going forward. But everything from how close are you to a school, intersections with the ADA, obviously for live sex clubs. I was delighted to be in Eros one day, which is a great San Francisco sex club, and the health department has "Don't fuck without a condom" in those words on a poster printed by the city of San Francisco. There are a lot of regulations, how and where alcohol is served, age restrictions, etc. And I'm pretty sure that Alex and others can speak to that more broadly, working with other clients. I hand things over.
Well, yeah, I mean, Mir just gave a fantastic tutorial on owning a kink-related business. When you move into a business that actually acts as a dungeon, things get a little more, the gray areas grow. There are many regulations in San Francisco and the Bay Area for sex clubs. Dungeon doesn't exactly fit into that. There are many regulations that are there for other kinds of venues that spin music and people hang out in, and not exactly a dungeon. A dungeon is an animal unto itself. And so over the last 20-something years, we've learned a lot about how to deal with zoning, how to deal with the fire marshals, how to deal with every single government entity and organization that Mir was talking about. There's more potential liability with a dungeon, and that's what everybody is concerned about. Every landlord is concerned that, you know, if you put an eye bolt up in their property and it gives way at some point, are they going to be held liable rather than the people who are running the dungeon? Because, well, as an attorney who's been on both sides of that equation, you know, when you try to get someone recompensed for an injury or something like that, I mean, you don't really have a choice but to throw a very large net. So that's going to be everybody, including the landlord. So, you know, one of the things what Mir was talking about, their insurance agent, yes, it's a very important relationship to have. Even if you're just producing a one-night, I mean, no one's doing anything right now, but producing a one-night party, there are insurance agents who will do that. Don't count on the folks who run the club to protect you and your resources. Don't count on the landlords to protect you and your resources. So that, you know, there's a multitude of questions and actions you can take to limit your liability. So yeah, that's the business spiel. And, you know, and part of it is I felt a number of times when looking for real estate with some clients of mine who ran dungeons, some of the job is going in there and really talking and trying to charm people, as you know, Mir probably knows well, charm people into allowing your client to move into their space. I mean, I've had clients where the place was still operational in a previous location. They were looking to move. We invited the potential landlords to the dungeon and said, come see what it is we do, see how lively it is, see how many different things are going on, see how happy people are, see how much laughter there is in the room, which I think surprises many people, that there is such joy and laughter and enjoyment and a diversity of people who are there. So yeah, and you know, and there are ways to truly limit your liability as much as possible by having that kind of team that Mir was just talking about.
Thank you. One of the things that you said sparked this like kind of curiosity. Maybe I'm putting a pin in this for myself of like how you know, you're putting a bolt in the ceiling and suspending people from it possibly is not significantly different from if you're like practicing the circus arts, or if you're like running a gym. And so what I'm curious about is like, is it still harder because it's a dungeon and it's ooky, like from a public perspective? I have no idea if that's something that you can respond.
You know, I was going to say something about this with insurance. It's such a big problem that NCSF started a members insurance program. Because, and this is for our coalition partners who are all groups and businesses or practices, and especially events. You don't want to go through the underwriting process once a year, right? It's a pain. So what we are is we're working with a broker who's working with an underwriter who has been doing this long enough that the underwriter is comfortable with our events. And the only way that they would do it was you have to be a member of NCSF to be able to access this insurance. But that tells you how bad it is, that we had to, we always looking for where we need to help. That was such a problem because, if you own a group where you're holding parties, you want to have directors and officers insurance for your club. You want to have liability insurance for that event. Even if it's like slip and fall, and the problem is a lot of people are having like house parties. They think, oh, I'm just going to have this giant house party, invite everybody over. It's like, if your insurance finds out that you're actually like charging money for this or is regular and habitual and can be seen as a business rather than just a Super Bowl party, they might not cover accidents that happen. So again, that's where the discrimination plays in, where it's harder for us to get the insurance that it's not like we have a lot more actually accidents that happen, or, as we talked about injuries, it's not a big problem, but it's the stigma of it. I also want to drop into the chat. I'm going to put in our key concepts for clubs, because NCSF gets this question all the time. How do I start a club? How do I start a brick and mortar, dungeon or play space? We kind of just gathered together a lot of just the concepts so that you need to be aware of. And of course, you need to access a legal professional in order to do this, because they're the ones that will know. And again, that's something NCSF can help with. But anybody who's interested, there they go. Thank you so much. That's a great place, just like a starter primer for issues that you might have to deal with.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Susan. And can I just say real quick, a great point of pride for my law firm is that we were the very first law firm to become a coalition partner of NCSF. So thank you for that, Susan.
I love it. In my notes, I also noted that, Randy, you have some experience of at least trying to start a dungeon. Would you like to speak to that briefly? Oh, you're still muted.
There we go. I failed. I tried to start a dungeon up here in the North Bay where I live, and I worked with the City Planning Commission, who were extremely helpful. And the city I work in is very progressive, considering it's in Sonoma County, and they specifically outline in their planning code sadomasochistic businesses and businesses where you come and you can have sex, while you do this sort of play. The problem with that is they require certain zoning areas, and there are only a very few little pockets in my city. And then they require certain setbacks, such as, up here you have to be 500 feet away from any school, church, or playground, 250 feet from, residential areas, and a number of other things. And I happened to find the one building in the entire city that met all those requirements. And I was working with the planning department, and it required, of course, it's not a permitted use, so it requires what's called a conditional use permit, where you have to go before the planning commission. And before I could do it, he rented the building to someone else. So, it's still a dream of mine. It's still something that I very much want to do. And, just before this pandemic, I was looking at properties in San Francisco. I had one landlord that wanted to rent to me on Folsom Street, and he was a little pushy, and the rent was a little high, and he was wanting to sign right away. And, thank God I didn't, because the pandemic hit, and I would have been stuck with a huge rent. So, the search goes on. If the right thing comes along, I'm going to give it another whirl. But there's a lot involved. There is a lot involved. It's been mentioned, the health department. You got to deal with the planning department. You've got to deal with the entertainment commission. You got to deal with the police and fire departments to sign off on, security measures and fire hazards and, entrance and egress. And there's a lot to be considered. And it's not just a thing where you go down and pick yourself up a business license after you've rented a building and, bring in the dungeon furniture. So it is a process, I've learned.
Very true. A lot of hurdles.
Yes, many hurdles.
So many hurdles. It's like the story you tell about like finding this single building. It's like it's technically legal, but it's so onerous to actually do that it becomes it becomes basically impossible, and like drawing like to trap laws for abortion where it's like technically it's legal, but it's so difficult to actually do that you can't actually do it.
Well, the nice thing about it up here where I live, and I live in the city of Petaluma, which is the first city of Sonoma County, is that they're progressive enough where, you know, those things we talked about that are technically illegal, they are saying, we don't care or we don't mind. It's right in our planning code that if you meet certain criteria, you can proceed and get a permit. And the really amazing thing in the planning code, it said, is that no person can, or no conditional use permit can be declined based solely on the type of business. So they'd have to come up with some real good reasons not to allow us in. The problem was that there's very few little zoning pockets that meet that requirement.
Got it. So with that, we're done with our moderated discussion. And I like this comment, fuck zoning. Seriously.
Can I just make one comment? I know one of the things that we're talking about here today is discrimination against BDSM folks and how to handle it if the cops knock on the door. And I think we all probably know this, but it's also important to recognize how people are treated if they are brown, if they're black, if there's something, you know, other than what the people who knock on the door expect. And I think Randy's advice is good, you know, be cordial, but you know, there are situations that are going to affect folks with some previous trauma, potentially with the law and with the legal system. Notice I don't call it a justice system. But so just something to put out there that I just never want to neglect when we have these conversations.
I really appreciate that. I do think it's very important to acknowledge that different people are treated differently based on the color of their skin, and it is not right, and we must continue to fight against that injustice wherever it shows up, and it does show up in our community.
Yeah, and our community is intensely diverse, which is one of the things I love about it.
Is there time for a kind of a funny example story about law enforcement?
Yes, please.
This is, you know...
you give that a shot. You give that a shot.
You know, 30 years in a career, you get a lot of stories to tell. Some of them are very tragic. Some of them are just funny as hell. And this is a funny one. I was working the graveyard shift. I was a young officer, only been on the job a couple of years, and we got a call of a rape in progress at a house. And so, you know, about 5 units converged on the house, and we could hear the woman screaming bloody murder inside, you know, help, I'm being raped. And so we didn't bother knocking on the door. The door basically came off the hinges, and we ran towards the screaming. And they were so enthralled in their session that they didn't hear the door come off the hinges, and 5 cops come charging through. Well, turns out it was a very large African-American man on kind of a petite little white girl. And we pulled him off and handcuffed him, and they were doing a rape scene. It was play.
Wow.
Nobody got hurt, you know. Some egos might have gotten bruised. You know, there was some embarrassment, but that's a very true story. That's one of the stories I'll take with me for the rest of my life. And of course, after we cleared the scene and went back to the station house, I mean, we all just laughed our butts off, you know, because it was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, these things can happen, and that's, you know, goes back to the neighbor calling because, you know, he hears screaming from the house, and that was an actual case.
Wow.
And we did end up paying for the door.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible. I'm very glad that was the outcome of that incident, and I can imagine like a lot of ways that could have gone differently.
Yeah, I'm personally traumatized for that African-American man right now, but that being said.
Yeah, I think like this kind of goes back to one of the things that we were talking about earlier is like have conversations before you get into scenes about what is and isn't okay, and like maybe be a little bit sensitive about the racial element of it, because you could be endangering somebody without really being conscious of it. But again, I'm like glad that that person got to go home without any repercussions. All right, so we just have a few minutes for Q&A. I'm not actually sure if we have any questions, but Christine, maybe you can unmute yourself and chime in here.
Yes, we do. We do have a few questions. So why don't we just launch in? Thank you, by the way. I'm Christine Gennaro. I work with the Dems Club too, along with Becca. Thank you, everyone. This has been great. I've been waiting for this for a while, and it's been wonderful. And I'm so glad that we had such an excellent panel. So we'll just, there are a few questions, not a ton. So why don't we just launch into them? That one we answered. So Uncle Abdul, hello, Uncle Abdul. Haven't seen you in a long time. Asks, doesn't California have a law or position that sexual contact, as long as it's consensual with all parties, is okay? My first thought, of course, is for some people, it's sexual contact. Some people, BDSM, it may or may not be, depending on the context of the relationship. Are there any thoughts about that from the panel?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
No, Susan, I defer.
I was just going to say it's only considered sexual contact if there's sexual contact, if it's with the genitals or the breasts. And so if that's where the violation occurs, that would be considered sexual assault if that's done non-consensually. But the problem is if it's a caning, or it's a choking, something like that, that's considered physical assault. So, and that's the problem we have, is some of the stuff we do would be considered in one thing and some of the stuff in another. And that's what's made it's so confusing how to deal with non-consensual activity. We would love to see it all moved under sexual assault, where consent is a defense, where survivors have anonymity, where people who are accused have the right to bring forth evidence of consent. I think it would probably have to be a true affirmative consent as written into the law. For BDSM, it would have to be consent to certain activities and the extent of those activities. And there would have to be exceptions in terms of, it has to be people who are 18 and over, of sound mind. They're not being coerced or exploited in some way. But I think it would be a very easy way to be able to kind of bring all of BDSM under the sexual assault umbrella, where it more properly belongs.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Alex, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Susan did a great job. So no, not really, except I did want to say that San Francisco General, and I know there's folks from all over the country on this, but San Francisco General actually is one of the only medical facilities that has a 24/7 office for these issues, for sexual assault. They do not force you to do a police report. It's free. It's 24 hours a day. And if anybody needs anybody to get help with sexual violence, domestic violence, it's a great service that San Francisco offers.
Thank you, Alex. So Anonymous asked, Uncle Randy said, you should be fine if you just cooperate with the officers who show up your door, as long as no one is bleeding or seriously injured. Realistically, many folks interrupted during a scene do look distressed or may have visible marks or be bleeding. What is the best practice in that case? Also, is there someone who can speak about how to navigate those types of interactions as a person of color?
Maybe I misstated a little bit, or perhaps there was a misunderstanding in the communication. Even if there are marks on the person, it's always best to cooperate. And I know law enforcement is really unpopular right now, but you get along a lot better if you just cooperate, because they've got called there and they have a right to ask those questions. So if there are marks on your partner, explain to the officer that those are consensual. This is play. This is what we do. This is called BDSM. And maybe give him a little bit of an education regarding the scene, regarding what it is that we actually do. And, again, affirming that it is completely consensual, practices between, two consenting adults who are not intoxicated, because you got to be careful there. And I really do think you'll be fine. And I do understand the concern with people of color, and they have a right to be concerned. And for the life of me, I've never been able to understand why, what goes on in law enforcement between people of color and law enforcement is in fact an issue. It's never been an issue with me. And I always adopted the mantra that, I will treat everyone as they treat me. And so anybody that is cooperative, I'm totally cooperative with them. And there should be, with two people at a front door or standing in the living room, because it's nothing wrong with inviting them in, unless you got a bunch of Coke or something on the table, that you don't want them to see. But, there's nothing wrong with giving that officer a little bit of an education as to what you do. And unless you're in Mississippi, I really don't think you'll run into an issue. I really don't. I'm not saying 100%, because I've been known to be wrong, but if you're honest and forthright and upfront about what it is you're doing, I think it's clear sailing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I was going to. No, go ahead. Thanks for that, Randy. I was going to ask if anybody wanted to follow up. And Alex, please go ahead.
I'm happy to follow up. I think that people's reactions to the police coming to their door can differ widely based on their experience with law enforcement. I also think that we run into a problem sometimes if the top, and I think, Randy, you were kind of speaking from the voice of the top, saying, oh, nobody's hurt, this is what we do this, we do that. Sometimes the issue there is that person the law enforcement doesn't know whether to believe that person, because they're the ones who are doing the inflicting in law enforcement's mind. Okay, so then let's say the bottom can explain it much better, which is totally possible, except if they're in full bottom submissive space and they are not fully present. So it does create some very specific issues with law enforcement, which just gets turned up, to 11 if we're talking about, brown folks or even more black folks.
That's why you're a lawyer and I'm not. That's a very valid point. Absolutely.
Thanks, Uncle Randy.
Yeah. So do we think that there are any resources that we can offer our BIPOC kinky folk for dealing? I mean, this is sounding more and more to me like resource-wise, it's an area that needs work, just like all of the anti-racist work that we're doing in the club and throughout our community. And really, as we know, the reality is that people of color really need better resources and better support to help them, because it's a very different picture when you're a person of color and the cops come to your door for a domestic violence situation, as opposed to if they came to Randy's door. And I think that's just something for future that we really need to reflect upon and do a bit more work on. Absolutely.
I think that's true.
And then ask our community how we can help and what it is we can do.
Absolutely. NCSF is really trying to devote a lot of our resources to more marginalized populations, because we see that, like we said, the intersectional issues. If you're African American and there's an issue about consent, you see that they're treated differently than somebody who is very rich and white, you know,
Okay.
and has the ability to get those resources. So what NCSF is doing is we try to sponsor Black POC events. We're actually sponsoring the Polycultural Diversity Alliance is having a consent summit on Saturday. And so by going into these spaces, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's so, you know, it's not diverse in this community. It is very diverse in our community. We just need to make sure that we're creating those links and making sure that every community has access to the resources. So, but you have to make an effort about it.
Yeah,
you know, you can't just wait for people to come to you. You have to make the effort to reach out, to get involved, to raise up diverse voices in your group, to leadership. You know, the people who have the privilege have to step back. There's a lot of things that have to happen so that we make sure that we're doing this outreach.
Yeah.
And we have a very, oh, sorry. We have a
I was just
thriving.
going to add what Al said was very valid as far as what that person's experience with law enforcement may be. Their experiences in their neighborhood or wherever it is that they live, they could have had terrible experiences with law enforcement. So they're going to be a little on the defensive side, a little more reluctant. And that's where, you know, and that's where you're terrified is right. And that's where Black Lives Matters comes in, and that's where education comes in. That's where organizations like yours come in to try and get people to have a little more understanding towards everyone.
Yeah, and I will personally commit to sex positive Democrats that we could do another panel and have it be majority folks of color and Black people. I think it's really important that you know, my communities are all represented. In the intersection of communities of, you know, white folks, brown folks, Black folks, and really do, as Susan said, you got to do the outreach. And I'm happy to, as a less melanated person of color, to do the outreach for that and make it happen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. I really
No,
appreciate
you're very
it.
welcome.
Yeah,
I
and
really
we have
appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah, we
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Also, and I just want to point out, we have a thriving BIPOC kink community here in the Bay Area. Huge. And I have been like, and I have a lot of friends in the community, and I'm just amazed at the developments that have occurred in the community and raising them up in the last couple of years. It's been really wonderful. And long time coming, because we tried doing outreach. Well, Alex and I have been around for a minute. We've tried doing outreach before, and it was only within the last few years, I think, finally, I think community has felt welcome and also developed a lot of strong BIPOC groups in the kink community.
And there are a lot of folks that have worked very hard to create that change.
Yes, I agree. So here we're going to switch on over to the kink business thing. So AJ Renard wrote, I run a kinky business and many social media sites shadow ban our profiles and won't allow us to run ads regardless of content. We're in the same boat, my friend, to promote our business, which makes it extremely difficult to promote product, particularly during pandemic when we don't have the same in-person and word-of-mouth promotion that is generated by events. So just, I mean, I know that there was a slight discussion in the chat around this. Just so you all know, the Sex Positive Dems Club members who try to invite people have been capped at 50. And we haven't gotten a straight answer from Facebook as to why, which leads us to, you know, issues around morality policing that I think we all are well aware happens within our community over and over. So I think that's more of a comment, unless anybody has something to add about Mir, perhaps, has run into this also.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had an answer and I don't. You know, we went from it, and it's gotten worse over the last 5 or 6 years since I've owned the grounds. A lot of it is driven by SESTA and FOSTA, which is a much bigger topic than we can get into here. But I've gotten to the point where we used to do a lot of paid Facebook advertising, and they literally won't take my money for a lot of very innocuous advertising that we want to do for educational events at the ground. So it's a common issue. Fighting SESTA and FOSTA is a whole other topic that we need to address as a community because of the ripple effect that it's having on all of our other, you know, it shouldn't be a controversial issue to be able to pay an advertising company to advertise your product, but there we are.
Yeah, it's, I mean, honestly, I think I will go so far as to say it is a shameful practice that a business that is operating legally, making money, paying taxes, is not allowed to choose their bank based on, you know, who they want to bank with. They were not allowed to get COVID loans because of what they did. And you know, you know, there's this sort of revolutionary part of me that's like, tax boycott. But you know, it's very risky. You can't really do it and expect to stay in business. And it is very, very frustrating. I represent a lot of adult, as I like to say, a lot of grown-up businesses, a lot of adult businesses, whether they're, you know, adult entertainment or, you know, dungeons or online businesses, and they're all suffering more than other businesses because of this morality policing. And I think it's monetary censorship. And Alex Austin does not approve. So, but hopefully we can try and change it. Again, move that needle a little bit.
And it has been a discussion within the club. Oh, sorry, I have to plug in. Apologies, everyone. It has been a discussion also in the club in regard to banking law and what's going on and how LGBTQ businesses and kink businesses have been impacted. And we are actually, that's something on our agenda to work on.
If anyone out there is in the banking industry, I've had this little seed of an idea to start a damn bank for us.
Well, there's also this idea of the state of California starting a bank that would free us up from. And that's a conversation that's a little bit in development and something we're thinking about.
Okay.
So we're going to get ready to wrap up, everyone, but I just have one more question, and thank you so much. So, since we have you all here, so future directions for the Dems Club, what would be the top 3 policy issues, regulations, laws, whether it be on the local, state, or federal level that you'd like to see changed?
Wow.
I mean, or one.
Small subject.
I mean, I will say I want sex work to be decriminalized. I know I'm not technically a panelist, but.
Yes. Yes, Becca, I agree.
Agreed.
I'd like to see the, you know, a definition for consent in BDSM included in the sexual assault law. And I know that, for example, California has more of an affirmative consent to their definition of consent. So I would think that this would be a great project for us all to work on and see if we can get that. I mean, I would think California is one of the first states I'd like to start doing that in.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes. Susan, let's talk. See what we can do about that. Yeah, I would also like to see, because we've done so much work within the polyamorous or alternative relationship community, I would like to see, you know, we're not talking about bigamy, we're not talking about being Mormons, we're just talking about allowing people to have legal relationships when there's more than 2 people. And that's the only way you can do it is by spending money. on someone like me, which was always my argument about being queer. It's like you couldn't get married, so the only way you could protect yourselves was by hiring someone and spending more money than anyone else.
Mhm.
Straight people can go to City Hall and they could get married. Queer people couldn't do that, and they had to hire lawyers to draft 5 different agreements to give them the protections that everyone else got by paying $10 for a marriage license. Rant over.
It's like a queer tax, like the pink tax, and like it's more expensive to be a lady, it's more expensive to be queer, it's more expensive to be a kinkster or a kinky business at least.
Very true. Very true. Sorry, I think my chair is squeaking. I apologize.
It's all right. Yeah, oh, somebody posted.
I'm not harming
that now
anyone.
that
I'm not
Somerville-
harming anyone under my chair, I promise.
Bummer.
or it's consensual. Somebody in the chat mentioned Somerville, and Somerville did recently legalize domestic partnerships between more than 2 people. So basically, they legalized polyamory, which is amazing. And we are working on making San Francisco the 2nd city to do that, because apparently we can't be the first. But
Right. So just so we have been working on that ordinance, and we do have cooperation from the supervisors and the mayor. So that is definitely, we're very excited. We were right in the throes of it when COVID happened, but of course Somerville goes ahead and powers through it anyway. Very proud of them for
And you
doing
have
it.
to hurry because Cambridge is working on one too.
Darn it! We need to be in the top 3. Very exciting. Well, I want to thank you.
I'm a firm believer in pride in the bronze medal.
yeah.
So, we're number 3.
Right.
That's okay.
Did anybody else have any other thoughts about law, and what would you like changed if you could wave the wand?
I think just getting the statutory laws changed instead of having to rely so heavily on case law. The penal code in California is an archaic document. And, even to enforce the law, you have to be well versed in case law. So it would be much better if they just spent the time, spent the money, and redid the laws to reflect what the current state of case law is. It would be helpful to the police. It would result in probably fewer arrests, because the officer's going by what the statutory law says instead of what the actual reality of the law is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely needs to clean up.
Yeah, and as Susan said earlier, I think you mentioned Samuels, that, in the legal world, we are stuck with precedent. We are stuck with case law that has come down decades ago in a completely different universe that we're stuck with until another situation comes up that goes all the way through the court system. You fail first, then there's an appeal, and then it becomes case law. So it could take a decade to get there. But there is a small part of me that would like to see new law to overturn that case. From what year, Susan? I can't remember.
Samuels was 1967, and we've been waiting. NCSF's been around for 23 years. We've been just prepped to jump on a case that that goes to appellate court so that we could create better case law. And it's just not happening, which is why we're realizing we just have to change the law.
Just change the law. Yeah, I'm with you.
More than one way to change the law. And with that, I'm going to wrap us up because we are a bit over time.
Yes.
And I want to also give the panelists a small amount of time to plug whatever they have going on that they want to plug. So I'm going to mirror up your first. What do you want to plug?
All right. Wicked Grounds is rapidly growing our online operations. So if you are on Facebook, Meetup, any of those places, do check us out. We are doing a growing number of online events and workshops, and we would love to see you there.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mir.
Alex.
I don't have anything particularly to plug, but I do want to offer everyone on this Zoom that if they have any questions after this is over, please do not hesitate to reach out. It will be free. We'll try to keep it to half an hour. And any questions that you have about this stuff, or if you have some offshoot question about something that's legal, just feel free to reach out. We're here to help.
And that's Austin Law Group, right?
Austin Law Group, and you can just go to austinlawgroup.com and it'll give you a way to reach us. Or
yeah, if you anybody who's in attendance tonight, if you go to our Facebook event, you can find links to everybody's main website, and underneath that you should be able to find these resources. And we're also going to be sharing with our mailing list a wrap up of this. So those are two ways that you can access these. But we've got two more panelists. Susan, what have you got?
So go to the NCSF website. Here, I'll put it here too. We do media updates. Sign up for our newsletter and our media updates, and that way you can keep on top of what's happening. We track kink and non-monogamy in the news, and you always want to know what's the latest that's going on. And NCSF has really been working with our 100 member groups, our coalition partners, to make sure we kind of transition into this virtual world. And so, we're available to help with virtual events. We love to participate on panels like this so we can help kind of get the word out about what's going on.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I also popped in there the virtual consent summit if anybody's interested. It's going to be really fun on Saturday.
Yeah. And I would like to, as I'm sure everybody here would like to, encourage everybody to become a member of NCSF, because they do such important work for our community.
Yeah, we are.
Spend your money at Wicked Grounds too.
Yes, we're maintaining. It's tough. This COVID is killing groups, and we are going to have a different BDSM kink community after this is over. And so we're just trying to stay alive so that we can help as many groups as possible get through this.
Absolutely.
Great. Susan, can you share a link to the virtual consent summit in the chat there?
Yes.
And Randy, have you got anything you want to plug?
Can I plug one of my classes?
Please do.
Okay, this coming Sunday, September 20th, I will be teaching a fire play class in Oakland at the Blackthorn and Sacred Muse Dungeons. This class is going to be, it's going to be a gas. It's going to be a lot of fun. The class is being done as a fundraiser with all proceeds going to the dungeon space, as they are building out a third dungeon on the property, which is going to be underground. They are well into the construction, but they do need to raise additional money. There's a number of fundraisers going on for it. I have donated a considerable amount and will donate again. And again, all proceeds are going to the Blackthorn, Sacred Muse, and Inner Sanctum Dungeon. You can find a link for that on my profile on FetLife, and I am Uncle_Randy. And the event is listed on my profile, as well as being posted pretty much all over FetLife. So I hope you're able to attend and donate to this worthy cause with a small entrance fee.
And the date on that one was what again?
It's this coming Sunday, September the 20th.
All right.
It's the day before my birthday. See, I plugged my birthday.
All right. Well, happy birthday and happy fire play class.
Birthday, Randy.
And with that, we are going to conclude this event. Thank you to our panelists for coming. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. It was
You're
great.
very welcome.
Thank you
you,
for
everyone.
inviting us. Appreciate it.
Right.
Everybody.
And we're gonna hop over to our member mixer. So if you are a member, you can come join us in I think the links to that went out in email, so check your email if you're a member. We will see you there.
Cool.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone.
Thanks everybody for coming.
So long.